Then in World War I, the United States was dragged into a world war where lots of Americans were killed. And at the end of the war, the American ideals, Wilson's ideals, were trampled on. And so Americans in general were, first of all, very pacifistic. They did not want to get involved in another European adventure, number one. Number two, the Great Depression. Guys, in the United States in the 1930s, there was 25% unemployment. In Germany in the 30s, there was 25% unemployment. Look what happened. Look who gets in Germany, and look who gets in, leading the country, in America. That's the difference between a democracy like America and a place like Germany. But, in 1938, going back to what Irving's saying, the Evian Conference, which was called by Roosevelt. Roosevelt called for an international conference to deal with the Jewish refugee problem. But Roosevelt, who understood there was a problem, his hands were also tied because you still had very high unemployment, and there was a sense of, how can you bring in all these, how are you going to feed, how are you going to employ these refugees? It's going to come at the expense of your average American. And your average American was not happy. They were against this idea, not necessarily because of anti-Semitism. That may have played a part, but it wasn't the only story here. Ladies and gentlemen, I mentioned about the overcrowding and that you had an average between 7 to 9 people per room and sometimes 50 people on one toilet. And you got the idea of the breakdown of the hygiene. The Nazis allowed the Jews to have 8% of nutrition a human being needs to live. 8%. 8%. Guys, you know American history, and you know about slavery in America, right? Okay? The slaves were chattel, meaning they were property, meaning that a slave owner had a vested interest in making sure that his slave was well fed because it was a workhorse for them. It was their property. It was expensive property until they got old and then they can throw them out, right? Here, the Jews who were going to be used as slaves as well, the Nazis gave them 8% of the food a human being needs to survive, meaning that from the get-go, there's more where that came from. We can kill them off this way. And therefore, we know from Adam Chernikov's diary, Adam Chernikov, the head of the Judenrat, the Jewish Council, that 80% of the food that Jews received, ate in the ghetto, came from smuggling.